everyone, and welcome back to This Is Not About Your Body. I'm your host, Jessie Nealand, and today I am interviewing someone I'm really excited to have on here and tell a little bit about her story. This is Jess Nurse, who is an actress and a writer living in Los Angeles and also a former coaching client and friend, and I'm really excited to have you on, Jess, and get to talk to you.
I'm excited to be on.
Cool. So I would like to start, I think, just by having you talk a little bit about yourself and your body image, like what that sort of history has been and what you've struggled with in the past.
Sure thing. So that's kind of what we talked about in coaching. I've definitely had like a really tumultuous relationship with my body and body image since I was younger. I think probably starting in third grade. And I felt like of me and my two sisters, I'm one of three. I was the one who genetically, on my dad's side, definitely like had more weight on me as a kid, and that was pointed out to me growing up, and it created this really difficult relationship with my body and also then with food. And then I had an eating disorder for most of my life, and even saying had is an interesting thing because
Yeah.
you kind of always have it. um,
Hmm.
but a tumultuous relationship with food, with my body image, with this idea of weight and how to live in a smaller body when I genetically was kind of predisposed to having a bigger one.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And so everyone who is listening, Jess has worked with me. We're not working together now, though, but I do want to just sort of bring some attention to the work that we did. So if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about the most recent tools or understanding or awareness that you have, because obviously a big part of my work is helping people find the underlying root causes, and those are so unique to each person. Like there are major patterns, obviously, but also each individual has unique underlying root causes. So share if you can. I mean, it's sort of like a hard thing to summarize, but what did you discover in that work were your underlying root causes? Like what drove your relationship with your body to be so negative, or with food to be so difficult?
Yeah, I think, I came into the work with you. I was dealing with a breakup where a lot of my body image issues were coming out in full force in a way that
Hmm.
um, was really difficult, and I wanted to figure it out with you. And we were talking a lot about worth and the idea of tying one's self-worth to body. And um we really tackled a lot of the voices that come in um with body image and the ways that the thing that you said that's been really incredibly helpful is like what are you outsourcing to your body? Like what are you outsourcing to the behaviors around your body and the ways in which you're relating to your body? And it became this way um to to I don't know, a lot of the attention got directed to that. And I
Yeah.
think bringing attention to that and the ways in which there were behaviors and safety around
Yeah.
that, I think has been like the bulk of the work and really, really
Hmm.
helpful work.
So in terms of underlying root causes, most of us have pretty major patterns. And then also it can just be fleeting day to day different things, details. One of the major patterns that I talk about in the avatars is the self-objectifier pattern, which is basically where you learn that attractiveness and worth are more or less synonymous or dependent on each other. So therefore your looks are if not informing your value to the world and your worthiness for having good things, then actually creating it. Therefore, if you lose attractiveness according to like whatever, normal conventional beauty ideals, then you have actually lost value in the world. It's terrifying. It's like a huge, massive, painful, terrifying concept. And so for you, I definitely saw that pattern showing up as far as like the attractiveness equals worthiness.
Yeah. I feel like
Yeah.
it was almost like textbook.
Yeah, in some ways. What did you think, by the way, of the like avatars material, like reading about self-objectifier stuff? Did that resonate?
It resonated so much. I
Yeah.
mean, just the idea that how I look, how I present in the world is related to my worth and how I'm treated. And the idea is that there's control around that, that the things that I want
Yeah.
the most in the world are actually directly related to how I look is
Yeah.
a narrative that it has been like so pervasive in my life.
Yeah. And that's one of the ones that I think is so difficult because it's both explicit and implicit. Like we believe it on a subconscious level. We also literally are told it.
Yeah.
Like there are literal messages just that how you look determines how people will treat you. And that's okay, that should just be okay. And therefore it determines like what kind of treatment you deserve. Therefore, it's basically your fault if people don't treat you nicely. Like those kinds of messages are intense.
They're everywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you and I had talked about I was I was the kind of kid where when I was 12, I would go to the library and I would sneak into the section that had like the cosmopolitans, like, I could get it.
Yeah.
And the covers of those are so insane. It's like,
Yeah.
what position to look sexiest during,
Yep.
or which I was reading at 12. Uh, but yeah, what can you do, 12 makeup hacks to
Yeah.
younger. And I'm reading that at this age and I'm getting
Yeah.
these messages over and over again that, um, yeah, that you have to really put a lot of effort into these things because it matters and that it's
Yeah.
going to get you the results that you want.
Yeah.
So getting that messaging from, media and getting that messaging from, I had a wonderful mother, a very well-meaning mother, but she is of a different generation. She's of a different country. She grew up in
Mhm.
Trinidad and Tobago. And a lot of the messaging that I got from her was similar. She was also very scared. I'm mixed race, and black, and she was scared that growing up in America, I would be treated badly as well. And so she gave me a lot of messaging around my image, and how I could kind of, assimilate and make myself
Yeah.
look a certain way. And I remember her saying things like, don't give them any extra reasons to treat you badly. And so this
Yeah.
correlation began forming between how I look, how I present, how I show up in the world for others in order to be treated well.
Yeah.
And that feels like something that's very difficult to shake even to this.
Yeah. So one thing that I always say is like we have body image issues when we place a false or excess amount of meaning, significance, belief, narrative, importance, whatever, on our bodies. So you're basically saying that somewhere in you, both explicitly and implicitly, like you learned to correlate being treated well or even being treated like neutrally. It almost sounds like to stay safe, like it was like about avoiding negative experiences, not just like achieving good ones or whatever, and that was on you and how you looked. So now we've got this huge importance placed on your body and your appearance. So it's no wonder that would then preoccupy your mind and be really, really, really difficult to shake.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what I chose to do as well, I went to college for acting and studied acting and came out here as an actor, um, there's so much messaging around that and you as
Yeah.
a product and like who you have to be. And so just from all angles, I was essentially being told, hey, you have to look a certain way. I think safety is like so key
Yeah.
for you to have said, to feel safe in the world. And then also to get the things that you want in the world, you have
Yeah.
to, even surpass the human level of
Yeah.
looking a certain way. Yeah.
So not only is it about staying safe,
Yeah.
being treated with respect or kindness, now it's also about getting the career you want.
Yes. Career I want. And then generally romantic
Yeah,
love
yeah.
as well. So it's like I'm
Everything.
whack-a-moling all
Yes.
angles. Yeah.
So this is a great example, and one of the reasons I want to do interviews like this is like to demonstrate like all of the different ways that this does show up in a person's story, why it is not so simple to just be like, oh, I'll just like believe in myself and like feel positively or like love myself through mantras, and it's so complicated. Like that's a lot of very significant layers stopping you from being able to just see your body as a body.
Yeah.
Like it's so much meaning and importance, drawing your attention to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It felt like it's to make family life feel easy, to not make it
Mhm.
anxious and worried for me, to feel socially
Yeah.
accepted, to feel romantically like a prospect, to feel as though, acting wise, I'm fitting into the box that people want me
Mhm.
to fit into. It does feel like it's really been uh, across all
Yeah.
areas of my life. Yeah.
So before I ask a little more about the career stuff, because I think that's like a big thing I really want to dig into, talk a little bit about your understanding of the difference between like people will treat you differently based on how you look, right? We know that. We know that there are stereotypes, there are biases, there are hierarchies in place. So, how do you hold in your mind as you're doing this healing work the fact that that is a true thing, but also not actually indicative of anything about you or your worth? Like, as you're trying to separate, this is my fault, this is my body's fault from this happens. How do you hold all that?
I think it's really difficult, of course. There's that voice that comes in and says, well, if it's possible for you, then why not solve all of your problems this way?
You
If
mean what? Like looking a certain way?
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you could expend so much energy into this, task of
Yeah.
looking this way, um, wouldn't that be the easiest thing to do? Wouldn't but it's
Yeah.
not. It's so much energy, and it's not authentically
Yeah.
me or who, I would rather read a book. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um I think something that you said in our coaching sessions that was really helpful. I was having that voice come in that was saying, "Oh, there are these things coming up that I feel like." This voice comes in and says, "Well, if you could just look better for these things, for these events," and you know, I you had said to me, "You could, but then you would be showing up in a way that was potentially not sustainable, and
Mhm.
whatever reaction you were getting." I think one of the things was like a date, or
Yeah.
and it was saying, oh, well, whatever reaction you get would then be to this version of you,
Yeah.
and maybe it would be positive, but then you're setting yourself up to be with someone who's only interested in you because of this manufactured and kind of like uh,
Yeah.
all of this kind of energy put into looking a certain way to yeah. And I think that was really helpful for me to understand that um there it is far better to show up authentically and show up in a way that um you know with me doing sustainably what works for
Yeah.
me and makes me feel good in my
Yeah.
body, and to have the reaction to that be
Yeah.
great. I want this. I'm showing up for this, whoever that person is. That's the better thing to do than try to fit into this box and try to go to this unsustainable
Right.
method or way
Temporarily.
temporarily, yeah,
Yeah.
in this body. Then even if it's positive, even if the person is like, "Ooh, I want this," then there's this pressure to show up as
Yep.
that for for the
Yeah.
rest of, you know.
Or if you can't, just live with the insecurity for the rest of your life. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and this is something also that I feel like Cosmo really, really drilled into our heads. I feel like any millennial uh people will sort of resonate with this too. If you were around during this era, it was basically like how to trick a guy into thinking you're hot. Like that was the whole deal. It was like how to say the right thing, look the right way, pose in the right way, do all these things, like, because he's not going to be attracted to how you actually look, and he's
Mhm.
not going to like your personality. So you have to do all this extra work to trick him. And that just seemed normal.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you just have to sort of pretend to be something you're not because guys don't like what you are.
Yes.
So with that as like the baseline, it really does sort of make sense. You're like, yeah, I should like crash diet into an unsustainably thin body, or put on a full face of makeup, or like present myself in a way that I don't normally for a date, because it's like I have to make the best impression. But what I've seen over and over and over for myself and for clients is that sets people up to feel the most insecure on the other side. They might meet the love of their life, but if they did it while they were crash dieting, the
Mhm.
rest of that relationship, it's always going to eat away at them. Like, they preferred me thinner. Like they liked that unsustainable body, or they liked the like hyper glam look that I had. And now it's like they see me in sweatpants and no makeup. It's so embarrassing. Whereas
Mhm.
if you just go on the first date with no makeup and in the body that actually suits you, like you never have to think about this ever again. But that
Mhm.
is in no way what we're taught to do.
Yes. Yeah. And that it needs to be about what how you want to show up and what feels good for you and what makes you feel confident, separate from um these messages and these ideas of who you should be and what's attractive.
Yeah.
And that, as someone who, another kind of rung or aspect is that I've, as part-time work, I've been a fitness instructor.
Mm,
And so to figure out, like, what's your relationship to fitness that is not related to how you look
yeah.
and makes you feel good in a way that's not about um a body a body that you have to do, like, so much more to
Yeah.
maintain.
Totally.
So yeah, I that was so helpful for us to talk about. Is I really like strength training, and it's something that I've really like enjoyed getting into, and it makes me feel good, and it's like a fun habit, and it's makes me feel strong, and there are aspects of it that I'm really interested in. But figuring out what the difference is between I'm I'm working out and I'm exercising to be in a thinner body, and I'm working out
Yeah.
and I'm exercising to feel good in
Yeah.
my body. And that, like, it is tricky
Yeah.
because you and I would even talk and I would say, "Oh, this thing," and you'd be like, "So that's kind of bleeding into
Yeah.
territory." But you can make yourself feel like it's not, you
Hmm.
getting really in touch with the authentic voices of, okay, what am I doing that is about my relationship to myself, and what am I doing that is about fear of how others perceive my
Yeah.
body. Yeah.
And for the record, this is something that like will probably always be difficult to untangle, right? Like anybody who's listening being like, "Oh no, I can't tell the difference. Like I have to figure that out." Like you might never know 100%. Like you might always have a little bit of a question. You get into a good exercise routine, and there's some little teeny little voice in the back of your head going, "Ooh, maybe this time you'll lose weight," you know? And you're like, "No, that's not what I'm doing this for." Like it's okay that they're all sort of like mixed up, but it is super important to acknowledge that they're mixed up and to really like take the time to try to find out, to try to honor the version that is you taking care of you, and not trying to shape yourself into something that other people will accept or respect.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, so I want to talk about this career thing. Being an actress in Los Angeles. I mean, I lived in Los Angeles for a little while, and I certainly saw the focus, the very image focused like culture that is there. Talk a little bit about more generally your experience, and I'm sure you have like lots of friends who experience this too. What do you think is like a normal impact from that career choice on a person's body image? Like, what do you see being sort of like the average way that that impacts people?
I think I'll speak mostly for the women in my life. I think that as a woman um, in the entertainment industry, you are asked to think about your body so much more than you would in any other career, most careers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So higher focus, but do you find that everyone is impacted negatively, or can you just actually like, can some people just notice and move on and not have it negatively impact them, do you think?
I
I know you
think
don't have to have the answer for everyone. I'm just genuinely curious what your impressions are.
I mean, I don't know one female friend of mine who is an actress who I haven't had a discussion about the negative impacts on
Mm,
their body image within the industry. I definitely have friends who maybe that's not as much of the focus. Or even that it's different aspects of it, that I have friends who are maybe more concerned with their hair color than their weight,
mm,
or that they're more concerned with should I get plastic surgery or not, or
right.
having friends who uh I don't know. Yeah, it definitely it I know what my things have been, and I know that for everyone it might be different, but I think what's interesting is that you're and I say this, kind of hating it as a phrase, but it's definitely been said before. It's you're the product, right? As an actor,
Mm,
like you are the thing, who you are, what you look like, how you show up, your height, your weight, your hair color, your skin color, all of these things are actually a, important to the job. Like
yeah, yeah,
they
yeah.
are.
It sounds like because of the fact that people are looking for a very specific, I mean, it's a visual art form. They're looking for a specific outcome. And therefore, everything about you, which if you're hired or not hired or whatever, like are going to impact that.
Absolutely.
It does have it plays a role. I would say something totally different, like dynamic, but something similar would show up with the athletes when I worked as a personal trainer, the athletes who had to do weigh-ins, where it was like wrestlers or MMA fighters or whatever. These dudes were not walking around being like, oh no, I'm too fat. They just had to get down to a certain weight. It was a requirement to compete at the level that they wanted to. And I saw that mess with people's relationship with their body on, a similar scale. It was just like, how do you have a normal relationship with your body when you literally have to lose like a tenth of your body weight every other weekend? Um, so yeah, it is relevant to your work in a way that most people, even if they feel insecure about how they look, it's not relevant to their daily work.
Yes, I think that's a great way to put it, is that it's a visual art form and therefore how you show up is relevant.
Yeah.
And I came out to LA in 2012, and I would say that a lot of things were antiquated even back then, in terms of I would yeah, I would go out for rap star's girlfriend number two, and the description would be hot, like attractive. Like they
Oh
would
my gosh.
I always laugh when they put like two descriptors being like attractive, like
Yeah.
hot, beautiful, or like gorgeous, attractive. And you're like, okay, we get it. Like you're really trying to bring that home. But that was the first thing that would be
Hmm.
listed for people who maybe don't know, character descriptions go out to agents and managers in order to submit their clients for the roles, and the character description is supposed to let the agent know who to submit. And so these casting directors will write the descriptions, and the agent or manager is supposed to submit whoever of their clients fits those descriptions. But these descriptions would be so visually based. They would be
Wow.
about exactly the type of look that they were
Yeah.
wanting for this part.
Are you saying that that's changed in the last 10 years?
I think it's changed a little bit, but I don't think it's changed drastically.
People are
And
just trying to be a little bit more PC,
nuance,
maybe.
yeah, a little more nuanced and maybe a little more open. And um, I think some descriptions have become a lot less about some very, I would say tropes have maybe changed a little bit more, which has been nice to
Got it.
see. Um, but I think it's still slow. I think there's still this mantra of, sex sells, and like, we want, what do we want to watch? Who do we want to watch? We want to
Yeah.
watch these kind of faces and these kind of people, and that is disheartening because stories should be about everyone.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Mhm.
So tell me about your experience. God, there's so many questions I want to ask here. Let me start with being mixed race in Hollywood. How does that impact your experience of like being cast, being um, understood, being represented? Does it? Yeah, tell me about that.
It's definitely something that I've had a really long journey with. I began as an actor feeling, I got a lot of messaging around, I'm black, I'm light skinned, I can be put in the category of ethnically ambiguous, and that a lot of people used to say that that was this great thing that I had going for me. Like, you can be ethnically ambiguous. And
I feel like
uh,
that was a big thing when back when I was an actor. I feel like being ethnically ambiguous was like something everybody wanted to be because it was what everybody was casting,
right.
supposedly.
And to be told that that was this pro, like that this would, this plus in my favor,
Yeah.
and be told by a lot of people that I should lean into that. And so there were ways in which, my whole life I had straightened my hair. I'd permanently straightened my hair, chemically straightened my hair. And that, people would say that was this thing I should definitely keep doing. And
Hmm.
I should learn various accents that weren't actually my ethnicity, in order to play those things. I am not Latinx in any sense of the word. I've done my 23andMe. I'm not at all.
Yeah.
And yet, there would be people who would say you should really lean
Yeah.
into that if you can. You should try to go out for that if you can. And that was a really strange thing in the beginning of my acting journey, to feel like instinctually I kind of didn't want to shy away from, my authentic uh, body and self and look.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of messaging around what would get me more work.
Yeah.
And only in the last couple of years have I really, I stopped straightening my hair. I have kind of showed up in ways that are embracing my racial identity more. And I see it more clearly when people try to, put me in boxes. But I think it's an industry that really feels comfortable talking about the visual of a human being in a way that can feel very dehumanizing,
Yeah.
is, um, I've had people say things like, oh, well, now that your hair is curly, you're going to book so much commercial work. Or, yeah, but just straighten your hair for anything leading lady. Um,
Wow.
yeah. And, oh, you get so tan in the summer. That must uh, change your type. Things that are,
Wow. Yeah.
uh, and you're being told it in a way that's like, oh, we're just talking
Hmm.
facts. But it's very dehumanizing, and it
Yeah.
really is. um it's difficult to, yeah, to call it out until you really understand what's happening. And I don't think when I first came out to LA, I did have as much awareness over what was making me not feel good about those kind of conversations. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say that I'm surprised, of course, but like it is certainly kind of interesting to think that theoretically we've gotten so much more progressive as a culture around so much of this stuff, but that this is still the kinds of conversations being had. Like you said, it does move slowly.
Yeah.
There's also something about that that I'm like, I'm not quite sure how to put my finger on, but it reminds me of being in the fitness industry as well, which again is sort of like, the idea that like, oh, we're just talking about facts. It's like, I mean, shows like the America's Top Model was also just talking about facts, but they also definitely dehumanized people and like sent horrible, unhealthy messages, right? Like they were just talking about how, oh, this person is bottom heavy and needs to like shrink their thighs to match their upper body and blah blah blah. Like, yeah, according to some well-established dynamic that these measurements matter, that is just factual, I guess. But also, it's like horrible, and we're sort of looking back and now, I think, on shows like that and being like, oh, no
Mhm.
wonder we all struggled
Oh my gosh.
with body image. But I feel like in the fitness industry, it was always very much like you just take such a myopic view of body parts, right? Like you just like zoom right in, and someone would be like, okay, I don't even need to lose weight, but I do want to like tone up, this butt shelf. I want this butt shelf to be higher, and
Right.
because I was working with models and actors as well, and that's such a weird way to look at bodies now. I think about it. I'm like, that seemed so normal to be like,
Yeah.
of course, we'll talk about your butt shelf and, your like bat wings or your love handles. Like it was all so zoomed in. And the idea was you can manipulate any of those individually and independently of a human person,
Yes.
which sort of can happen sometimes, but also is just so weird. And
Yeah.
like what you're talking about, like, can you straighten your hair and then make it curly again and then get more tan and then get less tan? Yeah, you can. Yeah, sure. Sort of. You can
Mhm.
control all those things. But also like, wow.
You're being told that, like, in order to do this career, you have to have that much of a neutral gaze on yourself.
Yeah.
You have to see these things as not being associated with um worth, but there actually is kind of worth messaging
Oh
around.
yeah.
And yeah, I think that I've been told very like strange things about my body and my visual representation that have been coded as, oh, this is just a neutral thing because you're an
Yeah.
actor, because you're in this visual field, but also have the messaging of, well, in order to be this thing, in order to be the romantic lead, you need to do
Yeah.
this. And in order to be on the CW, you need to do this.
Sure.
And in order to, play this kind of role, you need to do this. And I think that that's very hard, I think, for anyone. And my experience was that was incredibly hard as someone who already had like really big body
Yeah.
image issues.
Yeah. So it suggests that you not only should be able to manipulate all these factors, but that you should be able to do so without any impact to who you are as a person or how you feel about yourself, which is two completely unrealistic goals for most people, like
Yes.
separate and unrealistic. One thing that I always thought was super interesting about your particular story in this field was talking about like how people type you, how they perceive you, versus how you sort of perceive yourself. And obviously, like racial, presentation certainly plays a role in that. If people are perceiving you as like Latina versus Black versus, any number of other things, obviously that is a very weird thing to have like people sort of misrepresent you or misunderstand you or whatever. But you've also talked a lot about just sort of like the type of, I don't remember how you put it, like tough girl, tough hot girl, something like that. So
Yeah,
talk a little bit about how people tend to see you or the kinds of roles that you are asked to go out on.
it's so strange. Yeah, my leather jacket rolls.
Leather jacket roles.
I have a leather jacket almost exclusively for auditions. um, yeah, there is this kind of tough hot girl, tough, she's Aubrey Plaza-esque and
Mm,
you know, a little bit sardonic and very the detective, the cop, the fire person, all
yeah.
are the things that I go out for a lot. And there there is this strange thing around that, which is I'm just a sweetheart. I'm just like a girl who's got insecurities and
Yeah.
sensitivities and is, really, I think, a good listener and a good friend and all of these. I feel very different
Yeah.
personality wise than this thing that people look at and say, oh, you're this because I'm tall, I'm 5'9", because
Yeah.
an athletic and bigger bodied
Yeah.
build, because I am, Black, and there are racial kind of tropes around that. Um, because of all of these things about how I present, how I walk into a room, and the immediate kind of,
Mm,
messaging that we've gotten through media about what someone who looks like me, who,
yeah.
who is that? I think a lot of people will want me to be that in this industry
Yeah.
in a way that I can because I'm an actor,
Yeah. Yeah.
but always feels strange, um, when it comes to manipulating how I look to fit into that. Yeah.
Yeah. And since this is a podcast and most people can't see you, although we we will have like the YouTube video, I just want to tell everybody that you are currently wearing like the coziest looking soft white sweater and like have pink fingernails, and just definitely do not give me a leather jacket vibe right now.
Yeah, this is me and my comfy cozy. Yeah.
So that I think is something that's so interesting because obviously you're an actor, right? Like the job of an actor is to embody other, you know, people, personas, whatever. But I also went to acting school. I'm not sure if I talk about this enough that people would know that about me, but I went to acting school and I found it so frustrating that people perceived me to be a type that I didn't feel that I was. That I don't even know if it frustrated me on a career level. I think it just frustrated me. Well, it did a little bit because people needed me to be ready for like an audition at the drop of a hat. So you kind of have to look like you have to like live something close to how people are perceiving you, right? So it's like if I didn't blow dry my hair, which I never did, or wore makeup, and then I was like given a call at the last minute, I'm like, shit, man, I don't look anything like the thing that you're hoping I look like because that's what I did for my headshots. And I've like convinced you that that's how I look. It's not, it's like a very frustrating thing for that reason. But also it just felt icky to me because I was always seen as like sort of a sex pot, like because I'm not tall, I have big boobs, and I'm a brunette. I'm pretty sure that's it. I think that's the only reasons. But literally, it was like, I don't feel like a sex pot. Like, I don't know. I can, of course, like you're saying, like I can step into stuff and I can act, but when it's over and over and over and it's always the same thing, it starts to make you question kind of like how people see you. You're like, who am I? Am I a sex pot? Should I be?
Yes, yeah. And you probably had the experience of walking into audition rooms and you're amongst all of these brunette, short,
Yeah.
big boob
Other
spots. Yeah.
vixen-esque type.
And
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
you and I talked about this a little bit about I would get called in for, yeah, like a ethnically ambiguous modelly type.
Mm,
And I never felt like I could land those roles. Like it
yeah.
would be a little like almost aloof, like aloof, ethnically ambiguous modelly type.
Yeah.
Like, that's not me. And
Yeah.
also, like, the second that, like, modelly gets thrown in, I
Mm,
never had the stereotypical body of a model, and so there was this feeling of, "Oh, I if this is how people think that I look, and if I could just somehow match what people think that I look like, then I could have success in this thing that I really
yeah.
want to have success in, that I
Yeah.
want to be a working actor." And it's so difficult to um, know that you might get fewer auditions or fewer bookings when
Yeah.
you're showing up in a way that isn't so kind of classically like in a box for
Yeah.
people and wrapped in a bow, but that, do I want to make it my life's work to fit into this box
Yeah.
people want me to fit into? And for some people, that answer is yes. For some
Mhm.
people, the answer is, it is worth it to me. It feels sustainable to me.
Totally.
This is the thing that I want to do. Um, I I think that I'm somewhere in between, which is, if there's an incredible role that like would require me to change some things aesthetically, like I'm willing to do that.
Yeah.
But I don't want to live day in and day out with an obsession around my looks
Yeah.
that combats a very real um, body image,
Yeah.
uh, struggle that I have already.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I also think it would be, I mean, obviously this is impossible, but it would feel so different, I think, if you were going out for jobs that were not like you, but in a variety of ways,
Yeah.
right? Like sometimes you were sent out for soft and sensitive, best friend, and sometimes it was, tough and leather jacket, like, I don't know, cop. And like if it had a wide variety of things that were not you, I think it would sort of end up being kind of balanced because you would be like in the middle, just yourself. But when it's always this one sort of projected direction, I think that's when it really gets in your head. Because
Yeah.
now it's like, oh, like, should I be a tougher person? Should I be, like, I hope nobody finds out I don't actually wear this leather jacket in my
Yeah.
normal life.
Yeah. Yeah, the personality aspect of it definitely comes in as well. And it would always be interesting, like that stuff would come up in our work together and I would be like, well, this kind of has to do with body image, but maybe not so much. And you were like, it's all related. It's all
Yeah,
related.
totally.
Which is, yeah, energetically, who do I feel like I have to be? And
Yeah.
personality wise, who do I feel like I have to be? And how does it all kind of come back to this root cause of, well, people want this from me, and
Yeah.
I have to give them this in order
Uh-huh.
to be valued in the ways that make people feel comfortable, that make sense to people, that
Yeah.
they want from me. And that is the self
Yeah.
objectifier in a nutshell.
It is. And it's amazing how that doesn't even have to just be about your appearance, right? Like I remember you talking about feeling like you needed to like have more confident body language. And I was like, for what? And you were like, just like, maybe I should. And I was like, I mean, I would love if you felt so confident that that happened, of course, but like to put it on, who are you putting this on for? And you're
Yeah.
like, I don't know. Like it's this archetype that you're being cast as, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yes, yeah, to be able to move in the world in a way that makes people, I don't know, just this idea that you have control over how
Yeah.
people perceive you. And in some ways there's, yes, there is something to how you move in the world and how people respond to that, of
Yeah.
course. Um, but I think the thing that I'm, you know, trying to learn, trying to really integrate is um, making it less about other people and making it more about me and how I
Yeah.
feel, and taking the pressure off
Yeah.
of what I do is for other people to treat me
Hmm.
the way that I want to be treated.
Yeah.
If people aren't going to treat me well, then thank you, goodbye. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's really that's a really hard thing. I guess for me, that's been a hard thing to let go of, is to say I can just move in the world in a way that feels good for me, and
Yeah.
I have wonderful people in my life who really respond to that, and why would I want to um yeah, why would I want to change who I am if 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 that's the only thing that's going to make someone treat me
Yeah.
well? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think kind of like what we talked about before with if you were to meet a guy, looking a particular way, becoming who you authentically are, whatever that means, or at
Mm,
least allowing yourself to drop some of the stuff that you feel like you owe people because that's what they want from you.
yeah.
Um, it starts to become a vetting system. And in real life, that's a really excellent thing. In your career, it might not be, so it's kind of a complicated thing there. But it does become a vetting system because people who start to see more of the real you are going to actually connect with you a lot deeper. And those are going to be a lot more meaningful of a relationship, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But probably less people or different people will do that connection work, right? Because lots
Right.
of people out there are just happy to be like, "Ooh, yeah, I've projected onto you what I want to see, and I like that." So it's kind
Yeah.
of a big untangling process for the self-objectifier.
So much so. Yeah. I mean, I think I had it in my head that, oh, you just have to be like the A+ version of you in every way that you can when you show up
Yeah.
in a dating, capacity. And it's about, making sure that like everyone could be attracted to you.
Mhm.
And that will be the thing that leads to you finding your person,
Yeah.
because you will be, attractive to everybody. And so that
Yeah.
has to do with weight, and that has to do with makeup, and that has to do with how I do my hair, and that has to do with what
Mhm.
clothes I wear. And I and I'm not saying that I'm like, 1,000% like, yes, I come across the other side of this, because I'm a human who has had, 30,
Mhm.
30 years of experience of our society. But I do think that I've really like valued our conversations around, well, what if fewer people show up, but they're the ones who you can have like this really deep and sustained relationship with, and that
Yeah.
the person who is interested in um just like the trophy version of you is that's not going to be the sustained relationship. The
Yeah.
person who's just like, my what do I want to be valued for?
Yeah.
And maybe that isn't as obvious
Yeah.
as if I wanted to be valued for my looks and just my looks alone, and then that gets to be this like, siren call to anybody,
Yeah.
and that I can do that. I can put all of that effort
Yeah.
into being, or I can say, who I am is enough, and who I am, separate from all of those things is what
Yeah.
I want to be valued for, and I'm going to really live in live in the efforts of just being that,
Yeah.
I think
And I think
that's
there's something about that that's so important to touch on, which is for the self objectifier in particular. I think there is this hope that being attractive enough would be satisfying in the way that we like are sort of taught. everyone would value us, everyone would love us, and we would have all of these options at our fingertips and we would be happy. But it actually makes you pretty freaking lonely. Like, it not only can you never be good enough because, unrealistic ideals and the whole thing just doesn't work. But also, it is not a good feeling to be valued only for how you look. I mean, it feels dehumanizing, like you said. Even if everyone liked it, you're like not left with a deep satisfaction that you worked hard to look good. You're kind of left being like, nobody knows me.
And what is unsustainable about it, which is,
Mhm.
I always think of that scene in Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, where she like wakes up, she cracks the window so that he can wake up
Yeah.
every morning and do the curlers and the makeup and whatever, so that when she
So her
wakes
husband never knows.
up
Yeah.
and never knows all of the work that goes into that. And there is a feeling that I have that or have had, I think there was a time in my life where I would do fake eyelashes
Mhm.
every time I went out to anything important. And I, was a lot more concerned with makeup and hair and all of those things. And it became this really heart racing feeling when that I couldn't show up in that way, that
Yes.
if I was having to wash all of that off at night, and if I was out in public and I didn't have that and I ran into someone, and all of a sudden I would be, scared that this value wasn't there anymore. And
Totally.
yeah, at times that, certainly my weight has fluctuated in my life. And um the times where, that's the first thing I think if I haven't seen someone in a long time, if I'm in a bigger body at the moment, I think, oh, that they immediately notice that, and they are thinking that, and they're thinking about that on the way home, and
Mhm.
they're saying that to their partner. Ooh, she's,
Yeah.
and I it's so it's so hard on the psyche. Like, it's so
Yeah.
hard to kind of feel as though you're keeping all of those things up in a way that's so related to insecurity.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
think that's one of the reasons that a lot of people don't necessarily identify as having sort of classic body image issues. Like, they don't feel like they look in the mirror and beat themselves up or whatever, but how they look occupies a massive chunk of their brain space on a daily basis because they are managing how they look to other people, thinking about how they look to other people, ensuring that they look the right way to have the right value, whatever. So even if they don't like, sit around and say mean things to themselves, like that's a body image issue. Like, that is an issue because
Yeah.
you are constantly anxious about what's going on and constantly feel sort of beholden to these rules that you've made for yourself that you have to keep following or something bad will happen.
Yes, absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
exhausting. As a former self-objectifier myself, I fully recognize how exhausting it is. I also think it's interesting. One other thing to touch on that I sort of heard you mention is the feeling of like obligation. Now, obviously, people in different, various intersections of identity, marginalization, privilege, et cetera, are going to have different issues, right? Like, there's different stuff facing different people. And undoubtedly, like, having systemic oppression facing you, like if you're in a larger body or if you're in a body that is, considered so non-conventionally attractive that you're receiving um, discrimination or disrespect or whatever on a daily basis, that is very different and horrible. However, I have noticed something among people who tend to be a little bit closer to the conventionally attractive side of things, which is that one of the things it doesn't necessarily come from everyone else. It comes from inside, so that's the big difference. But what they will report is the feeling of obligation, like, because I'm so close, I sort of owe it to everyone to take the extra little step. And I can't
Mhm.
tell you how many conventionally attractive women have told me, I almost wish I were like not quite so close, like they see themselves as like, I'm just far away enough that it's exhausting and takes all my energy, but I'm so close that I can't let it go because it's not like, oh, whatever, I'm just like totally nowhere near this conventional beauty ideal, so nobody's ever going to expect it from me. Like, there's an expectation, a self-generated expectation that you have to do it because you can or because
Absolutely.
you're so close.
Yeah, I relate to that so much. Yeah, the idea that you're just outside of the category, right?
Yeah.
That you're just below it. So why not do that work to
Yeah.
be like right in it? And I've felt that yeah, definitely within my life. And um it's difficult because it's like you do have that you do have that messaging around it, which is
Yeah.
just, oh, it's like all you need to do is lose that last
Mhm.
pounds, that last 15 pounds. That soundbite is like something that's haunted me, like in my life, like follows me around. And it's just like, ah, yes, if it is just 15,
Yeah.
and it's not, it's why have we made it so, it's so specific and it's so untrue.
Yeah.
And the work that needs to be done. I mean, um, I think something to acknowledge is like the brainwashing of it all and the ways in which we can just actively unbrainwash
Yeah.
ourselves. And I think there was a time in my life where something I was doing really actively was I started only following like on Instagram and on social media, only following, or not only following, but starting to follow actively people who had my body type, and
Mm.
to not um follow, or at least try not to follow, people who had a body type that was triggering to me in some way,
Yeah, yeah.
especially if the work they were doing in some sort of influencer space had to do with their bodies.
Yeah.
And that was really helpful, is to follow, Robin Lawley and Ashley Graham, and I have the privilege of knowing Preciously, and um, these women who are incredibly embodied, but live in these unconventionally,
Yeah.
um, uh, gorgeous bodies,
Yeah.
but not something that I had grown up with.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, to just kind of to am I allowed to swear in the
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
like unfuck my brain,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and to try really hard um to see that it yeah, that the specific box that we've been told is not is really just so contrived,
Yeah.
and we have um and that and it's not as real, or as like, I think we talked about it once where I had a boyfriend in college who one time said, your body is like a Greek statue. And that was one of like the best things that I had ever heard,
Yeah.
as I was living in a curvier body, but to have it be, um, seen as like, ah, yes, of the Renaissance era.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, what a positive, what an incredible, beautiful thing. Um, and that that is just as real of a feeling
Yeah.
that someone could have about my body, of a way of looking at things, of a way
Yeah.
of really authentically feeling about someone else's body. And so yeah, I think um the work that's been really helpful for me is to understand that um there yeah, the meaning that we give this type is
Mhm.
it, it it's not the real thing, and it doesn't have to be the real thing.
Yeah. And that's, I think, why it's so important, honestly, to have like support and community and connection in a space where that is not being held up as like the one type of body to celebrate, because there are so many people in spaces who don't care about that at all, and
Mhm.
who also like might prefer something different. And if we're never like supported by that, if we don't have that in our brains and our bodies and our lives, it really starts to feel like that just doesn't exist. So, reading the books of the people who write this kind of liberatory work, following the accounts of people who are just out there having bodies, not trying to fit into this ideal, whatever it is, like that stuff matters. And I would say even connecting with people and communities where there's like just a like-minded approach, it can support your unfucking your brain
Yeah.
like crazy because we are wired to want to connect to our, sort of greater human tribe, right? So like the idea that you would just be able to do this work alone and just stop caring, like when you're in that kind of space that's so high pressure, isn't not going to happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, and it is work. It's like to I I would say sometimes in our sessions I would be like, I think of myself as such a body positive person, and yet like we're having these sessions and I'm
Yeah.
seeing all of these holes in my own like, understanding of it,
Yeah.
and the growth is long and it's internalized, but it's such important work to be doing, and I'm really like, yeah, I'm I can't say enough how grateful I've been for our work together. Yeah.
It's very sweet. Well, thank you so much for being here, Jess. This was amazing. Made me so happy to get to talk to you and have you share your story. I just want to offer you the opportunity. If you want people to look you up or find you, where can they find you? And if you
Sure.
don't, you can say that too.
I'm on social media as Jess is not a nurse, because my last name is Nurse, but that is not my profession. So Jess is not a nurse, and yeah, I love talking with you. And if anybody is considering coaching with Jesse, it's so like I can't recommend it enough.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. And everybody who is listening, thank you so much for being here. You can find me on Instagram as well at Jessie Nealand. You can find me on my website, jessienealand.com. And yeah, I'm so happy to have you listen, and I will catch you next week.